Yes, indeedy, folks. It's the Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Last week, I promised that we'd be looking into what the Bible actually says about who was created in God's image. So let's start out with faith, knowledge. Take your pick. In the image of God. A look at what the Bible says about who was created in God's image.
We are all aware that when you speak of something as nebulous and as abstract as the image of God, it's only natural for us to create that image from the only thing that we have, and that is our experience with the world. How else could we create it? We have no other experience than our five senses. So it is only natural that we would give God the attributes that we ourselves experience and understand in our hearts and in our spirits and in our interrelating with the world through our five senses. Therefore, it is very difficult to distinguish between what is the image of God and our being created in the image of God, and of course our creating God in our own image instead. It's only natural that when we're children, we assume everybody's house is like our house. Everybody gets fed steaks every night or gets fed beans. Everybody has to practice the piano for half an hour or watch TV or whatever it is that is routine in our house. We as children assume that's true of everybody. As we started venturing out, we start to realize that that isn't necessarily true. Other people have different ways of doing things than we do. Just so, almost all cultures, in fact, to a T, every one of the cultures comes up with gods that they have created in their own image. Still, we can discuss what is this concept of being created in God's image. Today, we're not going to get into the larger issues of that, but we are going to think about the biblical, what does it mean, according to Genesis, according to the first two stories in Genesis, to be made in the image of God. So we're not going to consider what a giraffe considers God to look like, which I'm quite sure is quite a bit like this. We're not going to consider what chickens consider God to look like, which I'm guessing, but I'll bet it's something like this. We're not going to consider what whales think that God looks like, nor are we going to consider what wolves consider God to look like. Now, in the case of wolves, I'm pretty sure that this is the common concept of what the wolf god looks like, the God that is perfect in every way, and we are merely expressions of that. However, I suppose that the fundamentalist wolf gods believe in a wolf that is looking sharp would be their god, something more like this. Well, okay. That was a joke. Actually, that would be more like a wolf god for a wolf that's going on his prom. But I digress. Let's get back to what we were chatting about, and that is the biblical account of the creation of humankind. Specifically, looking at the issue of being created in God's image according to the Bible. Let's do a little quick review. As we saw last week, out of 32,000 years of humans trying to communicate with one another, we are looking at a very specific time that was from 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, basically 2,440 years ago. We're looking at the priestly authors who gave us the first book in the Bible, the first account of the creation of humankind. And we find that creation story in Genesis 1:1 through Genesis 2:3. The second account that we find in the Bible is from the Yahwist authors, who lived about 2,950 years ago, and they gave us all of the rest of Genesis from 2:4 on the way through Genesis 50. But of course, the creation story was pretty well over by the end of Genesis 2. By the time we get to Genesis 3, they're off on the other stories about the begats and the begots, and on to the Noah story and the Joseph story. So we have these two stories of the creation of life. Let's first take a good look at this story of Adam and Eve, shall we? We're all pretty familiar with the story of Adam and Eve. God got lonely. God decided to make himself a doll to play with. God took some dust, gathered it up, blew life into it, made Adam. Adam got to where he was a little tired of dancing around in paradise, so God decided that Adam needed a playmate to be with. And so he put Adam to sleep. He took a rib out of Adam, and from the rib he made Eve. And from there on, the whole rigmarole began, shall we say. Things were never the same for Adam again, and I doubt that he's been bored much of that time. In the meantime, I heard the story the other day. I'm going to digress here just a bit. I heard a story the other day about a fundamentalist church camps in the Midwest somewhere who take these young children and in indoctrination programs teach them all about how, there are some people that tell you that you just come from goo and ooze and you wouldn't want to be made from goo and ooze, would you? And all the kids say, no, we don't want to be made from goo and ooze. Well, of course, there are two problems with that little way of indoctrinating kids. One is it's teaching them that goo and ooze are bad, when in fact we should be teaching kids to play in goo and ooze and have a good time, because making mud pies is a short enough time to be celebrating the world. The second problem with that story is, of course, evolutionists don't teach that we came from goo and ooze. We teach that we came from the very miracle of life, the very miracle of beingness. The story of coming from some goo and ooze, the story of gathering up some dirt and making a little doll to play with, that's the Adam story, folks. That's not the evolutionist story. But once again, I digress from our story, as I am wont to do, apparently. Let's get back to the story of Adam and Eve according to biblical tradition. In the two biblical stories of the creation of life and of humankind, we have the Yahwist authors telling us that on the third day, God gathered up dust and created Adam. On the fourth day, he created Eden, and he went on to do the rest of making life comfortable for mankind through the rest of the 6 days, until on the sixth day, he took one of Adam's ribs and made Eve. These were the Yahwist authors, and they never once said that Adam was created in the image of God. I'm speculating, of course, but I would think that they would consider it insulting to God to think that God was made from some dust, and that you could possibly make anything out of a pile of dust that would be anything near the image, much less the being, of God. But I do know that, at least according to my King James Version, the Bible never says anything about Adam being created in the image of God. Now, according to the Bible, there was a story where mankind is created in the image of God. This is where we get the image of God thing, and it's very often confused with the story of Adam, but it's not the story of Adam. This story comes not from the Yahwist authors who lived 9,500 years BCE, but rather from the priestly authors who lived 440,000 BCE. 440 years BCE. As we have seen, the priestly authors were the ones who wrote the first story of creation in the Bible, the story that is told to us in Genesis 1:1 through Genesis 2:3. The Yahwist authors, with the story of Adam, gave us the second story of creation in the Bible, the story that we read in Genesis 2:4 through the rest of Genesis 2. So, what did the Yahwists say? And what did they have to say about humankind being created in God's image? Well, let's go back and look at day 6 of creation, shall we? It says that on day 6, the Yahwist authors tell us, as I said, the priestly authors have told us that God took a rib from Adam and created woman. But the Yahwist authors tell us that on the 6th day, God created the beasts, the cattle, every creeping thing, and man and woman. And folks, this is the story where it says very specifically, God created them in God's image, male and female, God created them. It absolutely says nothing about creating a man and later creating a woman. It absolutely says nothing about creating a man in God's image and then later creating a woman. It says specifically, God created them in God's image, male and female, He created them. Of course, male and female is also how He had created the beasts and the cattle and every creeping thing, or at least most creeping things. We'll discuss that in a minute here. But male and female, in God's image, God created them. So God does not look like this. God looks like this.
So the only time the Bible says we were made in God's image, it says that we were made male and female. It says we were made in God's image, and God's image includes being sexual. Along with the celebration of sight, sound, heart, emotion, everything else, in God's image, just like God, we are sexual. Indeed, I think that we can look at the flowers of springtime. I think we can look at the glory of childbirth. I think that we can look at the whole rigmarole, and it could be argued that God is sex. But that's a discussion for another time.
So, I'm sorry to those 2,000 years of men subjecting women to all kinds of horrors in the name of, well, you're just a helpmate. I'm the one who looks like God. I'm sorry to the people who have been separated from God by believing something as silly as that God looks like a male. In fact, if we look at life, not only just look at the Bible, but if we look at life, That is just preposterous. There are species where there is male and female in each of the species. Earthworms come to mind. When they mate, they get side by side, and both of them are male and female, and they get along just fine. There are even some species that are only female. But folks, there's no species on life that is totally male. That is a wounded, frightened male ego that ever came up with the concept that God is male. That is not even biblical, much less having common sense. So let's pursue this just one or two steps further, shall we? The fact is, as a person who believes in science and evolution, I have no trouble with this concept of being created in God's image. Biblically, where it says that we are created in the image of God, male and female, we are created. After all, that is the image of nature. Look at it. Male and female, nature figured out, is the best way to propagate species, to pass genes along in a new way that is constantly changing, constantly coming up with the new, constantly coming up with what this great wahoo, this great thing we call life, this phenomenal magic of being is best perpetrated by. And we are part of that, just as much as every chimpanzee and every giraffe and every fox, yes, even the sharp ones, are a part of that. So, I have no problem at all with the concept that in the image of God, God created them male and female. In the image of God, God created them. Well, since my God is creation, since my God is the very living, breathing glory of life, that is the story. No problem there at all. So I can hear some people jumping up and down. Oh, what? Male, female, that just shows that homosexuality isn't supposed to go on. But remember, folks, this story says male and female, in God's image, God created them. Well, in every species of life, there are homosexual relationships. Those penguins we were making a big stink about getting together and going through all the hardships so that they could survive and keep the young going. In the New York City Zoo, the only penguins that have been having monogamous relationships for years is a homosexual pair of penguins. Giraffes have homosexual sex. Salmon have homosexual sex. Every species of life has homosexual sex. So, when the Bible, or when the lesson of God and being created in God's image is that God created them male and female, God created them, that includes homosexuality, folks. That includes sexuality in all of its being, not in our concept of what it should be, but in our relationship to what it truly is.
It's time to drive the John Day River. Last week we adventured on Highway 26 from Vale over to John Day and beautiful little Dayville. Dayville is a thriving community consisting of exactly one mercantile. And at Dayville, we met Sam and his two girls. Sharon is there on the porch, and Mary is up there smiling on Sam. Today, we're going to head west from Dayville and take a look at beautiful Picture Gorge. And in the middle of stunning Picture Gorge, we are going to leave Highway 26 and stick with the John Day River as Highway 19 and 207 head up to the north. As you approach Picture Gorge, this very informative sign is on the left of the road. I recommend stopping and checking it out. It was very interesting stuff. The sign informs us that this amazing opening in the earth was not a fast process. It was first laid down as a lava flow, and over a long period of time, this chasm managed to get formed in the earth. And this is Picture Gorge as it looks from the sign. Just a stunning gash in what otherwise have been very predictable hills. And now, folks, just as I promised, here comes my most sophisticated piece of equipment yet. Yes, folks, the car cam. Car cam! Car cam! Car cam! Very sophisticated. Remember, kids, don't try this at home. Car cam! And here we go through Picture Gorge. Well, folks, I might work a little on this most sophisticated piece of equipment, but in the meantime, you can get some idea of what a stunning gorge this is. There's the John Day River off to the right, and this beautiful, beautiful windy road. Gosh, I just love roads that wind around. About a minute into the drive, you start to see these signs about the fossil beds and the Highway 19 turning off. And you think, well, that's fine, but it sure doesn't seem like it should be coming up very soon. And then, out of the blue, even with all the warning signs about it coming up, Highway 19 takes off. Before I was even ready for it to be there, I practically ran off the road, stopping and figuring out what was going on. I was convinced the road would just be following off to the right there, but that's not where Highway 26 goes. Highway 26 curves off to the left through a new canyon that opens up, and Highway 19 takes off to the right, and that's where I had to stop and make sure that that's what I wanted, and sure enough it was. So now we're going to take a short little car cam journey as we get out of the canyon from the junction we were just at and going up Highway 19 following the John Day River. As you can see, the canyon quickly gives way to a broad valley with stunning desert hills breaking off on both sides of it. It's really quite a drive up this Highway 19. We will be taking several pictures of it here. Highway 19 really does go through some fantastic country, very beautiful green valleys, stunning hillsides. It was a beautiful day, great blue sky with white clouds. And after 19 miles from having left Highway 26, we arrive at Kimberly, which is where the middle fork of the John Day River joins the John Day River, and the river quits heading north and starts to head to the west. Well, that beer drinker that goes and talks about faith and knowledge took up most of the time this week, so I'm going to have to leave our great adventure at Kimberly today. Next week, we'll enjoy the John Day River as it turns toward the west, goes through Spray and Service Creek. We then leave the John Day River and go back over a 3,600-foot summit and drop back to Highway 26 at Mitchell. It is a spectacular drive, and we will enjoy it. Peanut was walking down the street. It was assaulted. And that tops off another episode of the Great Wahoo. Once again, thanks for joining me. And as always, keep celebrating the Great Wahoo!